Hello everyone, my name is Robert. I am the host of Unraveling Politics. This is a show where we discuss the news of the day and I provide my analysis in a way that everyone can understand. In the last week, not too much has happened, so I want to kind of turn the page on the election or kind of turn away from it. I can see the presidential election, I can see that can really wear people out. And if you're like me, you've been getting bombarded with mailers and it's very aggravating. So let's take a break from that. Let's talk about I will talk about it a little bit, but not right now. Let's talk about what's going on in Congress, which is the opposite of progress. So we're going to talk about Congress. Specifically, there will be a government shutdown. Well, there might be. Congress, if you don't know, Congress has to approve a fiscal budget every year. Normally, that budget is supposed to be passed in September, because the federal government's budget year begins on October the 1st. Now, we haven't actually done this in years. It has been, I think, 20 or 25 years since the budget has been passed on time. Usually what they do is they pass something called a continuing resolution, also known as a CR, and they will do that to extend government funding at current levels until a certain date. Usually they do it until September or until December. So, how is this important? Because this would be a full federal government shutdown. Every federal government agency would shut down except the very non-essential ones, and those ones would not and those workers would not be getting paid. They do get paid eventually; they get back pay, but it usually takes a while for them to actually get it. And you think about it, there are hundreds of thousands of federal government employees. They all don't just work in Washington, D.C. There are plenty of federal employees across the entire country, and those people are just like you and I, and they need to get paid, they have families to feed, and things like that. And the last big government shutdown was in 2018 and 19, and that was during Donald Trump's presidency. That went on for weeks and weeks and weeks, and there was a lot of suffering involved, and we do not want to see that again, especially right before an election. So Trump has called for the GOP to shut down the government on September 30th if they don't attach a bill that will require proof of citizenship to vote. Democrats do not want to see this passed. It really doesn't make a lot of sense because it's already illegal. I'm not exactly sure why Democrats are opposed to it. I guess they're worried about voter suppression. But the parties are both far apart from an agreement. The leadership, from President Biden to leaders in Congress, they're very far from an agreement, so it is likely that a continuing resolution will be needed to extend government funding until some point in the future. Now, the length of the continuing resolution will matter. If it goes until after the November election, hardliners will likely vote against it. Conservatives, especially the ones that who believe Trump is going to win, they want to extend it until March 2025. They want to keep government funding at current levels. Democrats and moderate Republicans want to extend it until December, which would be after the election, but before the new president and new Congress is sworn in, and then they would have to pass a new bill while Biden is still in office. The House is in session almost every day of the work week between now and September 27th, and the Senate is most of September. They're here most of September, but they will not be in session in October. So the problem with that is if we have there's two problems. First, if they extend a CR, if they extend it to a day at some point in October, so they pick October 15th or whatever, I'm just pulling that out of a hat, they're going to have to come back into session, right, as many of them are campaigning for re-election. That would be a pretty dumb move. So my guess would be the continuing resolution, there's going to be a continuing resolution. There's no way this budget, well, I guess it's possible, but it's very unlikely this budget will be passed on time. And this will have to be extended until they're going to have to extend it until after the November elections, which makes me think the conservative hardliners are going to vote against it. Speaker Johnson, as we talked about in our very first episode in the Coalition of Chaos, will have to get Democrat votes in order to pass it. Democrats will probably oblige, and we'll have to see. If there's going to be any government shutdown, if you ask me, it's going to be unlikely it will be before the November elections. It's probably going to be after. And here's something I noticed about Speaker Johnson, and I'm sure if you've been paying attention, you would agree with me. Speaker Johnson spends more time battling his own side than he does the Democrats. It's sad for him. I guess it's good for Democrats because they can kind of focus on taking the majority while Speaker Johnson has to worry about his own side trying to bring him down constantly, as they tried to do earlier this year. And we talked about in our very, very first episode. All the way back then, it was a whole 5 months ago. I can't believe it's been that long. Or no, it's been 4 months. It's only been 4 months. Feels like it's been 5. Anyway, I also want to talk about the Senate elections. Because a lot of people are focused on the president. They're like, oh, the president. Who's going to be the president? Presidents are not autocrats. It's not like we elect a king every 4 years and then we get rid of them if we don't like them and then we put a new king in. That's not true. Our founders specifically set up our system so that there needs to be a mandate. Not necessarily from the people because they didn't believe in direct democracy, but they wanted a mandate. They wanted a mandate from all over the country. Like they wanted a mandate that was a consensus, like a consensus. They wanted the president, specifically they wanted the president to govern via consensus. And here, let's talk about the Senate first. The reason why it is very difficult for Democrats this year to hold on to the Senate is there's a couple of reasons. First is just the map. Democrats hold 19 of the seats in this election. Republicans hold only 11 of them. So if you think about it, they now have to defend 8 more seats than Republicans do. Then the independents control the other 4, by the way. If you look at the seats, Democrats have to defend seats in Washington, California, Nevada, New Mexico, Hawaii, Montana, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, Virginia, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Delaware, New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. So those are all their states. Now, of those, there are only 8 swing states, I would say. Nevada, Montana, Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Maryland. Maryland's not normally a swing state, but it is very close. The polls are very tight there, so it's unlikely to flip, but it is something Democrats do need to keep their eye on. Then Arizona, which Arizona is also a swing state, but those are that's Kristen Sinema's seat. She's retiring. The Democrats will almost certainly win that seat. And then the Republican seats. So you think about it, Democrats have all these swing states they need to hold on to just to keep the majority. And your next question would be, well, can they make any gains? Not really. The only seats that Republicans hold are in in North Dakota, Wyoming, Utah. There's 2 in Nebraska, Missouri, Indiana, Tennessee, Mississippi, Florida, and Texas. Only Florida and Texas are swing states, and those are very unlikely to flip. And then the independents, they control, as I said, Arizona, West Virginia, Vermont, and Maine. So the Senate right now is 51-49. So Democrats have 51 seats. Republicans have 49 seats. They currently hold the seat in West Virginia. That's held by Senator Joe Manchin. He's a very moderate Democrat. He was one of Biden's biggest thorn in his side. So that seat is gone. He's retiring. So that means the Senate is 50-50. Which would mean that in order for Democrats to control the Senate, Kamala Harris would need to win because then Tim Walz would be the tiebreaker. But that would also, 50-50 would assume Democrats hold on to every other seat in the country, which is very unlikely, and this is why. There is one particular state that they are likely to lose in, and that would be Montana. The Republican is Tim Sheehy. He leads on average in the polls by 5%. That's a decent lead. However, he has made some racist comments about Native Americans. He said a great way to bond with all the Indians while they're drunk is to get with them when they're drunk at 8 a.m. and you're all together, and you can tell whether they like you because they'll throw beer at your head. That's what he said. That was over a week ago. It doesn't seem to be causing much of a problem. It doesn't seem to have been a big scandal, but it's certainly not going to help him. We'll have to wait and see. Then the other seats, Brown in Ohio, Sherrod Brown, he is the second most likely to lose his seat. He is currently leading by 3.6. Generally, Democrats are favored in Ohio, so that would be so he could lose. I would say because the Republican candidate is not very good. he, at this point, is probably will just hold on. Then in Florida, the Republican has a lead of over 4%. In Texas, Ted Cruz has a lead of over 6%, so those are probably not going to change. In Nevada, Jackie Rosen has a decent lead of about 10%. She's going to hold on. We talked about Arizona. The Democrat Ruben Gallego, he's a representative. He's likely going to hold on. Then Bob Casey in Pennsylvania. This is probably the Democrats' next most likely seat to fall. And the reason I say that is because the race was pretty clear for a while that Bob Casey was going to win. I would say he was going to win by 8 to 10%, but now those polls have slowly been narrowing. So he is in danger of losing his seat. In Maryland, also a woman named Miss Also Brooks, that's her name, has a lead of 4.4% against former Governor Larry Hogan. Larry Hogan was a very popular Republican governor in a deep blue state. So the fact that this should be a lead of at least 10 to 12%, but it's only 4%. That is concerning for the Democrats. And as I said, it's pretty unlikely they're going to lose this seat, but it's something they do need to spend their resources on. In Wisconsin and Michigan, they're holding on by about 5%. And Amy Klobuchar her seat is safe; she isn't going anywhere. And according to the few polls that exist, and in New Mexico, Martin Heinrich, the incumbent senator, is leading by about almost 10%. So he's not going anywhere either. So as I said, the Senate is most likely to be 51 or 52 Republicans, which would mean that Republicans would control the Senate. Now, let's flip over to the House. At this time, the generic ballot, which I've talked about on this show before, generic ballot is people are asked, would they vote for a generic Republican or a generic Democrat? There's no incumbent. They strip all that out. Democrats are leading by just over 1%, which is well within the margin of error. If you look at the polls at this time in 2022, 2020, 2018, 2016, 2014, and 2012, and then you compare it from this time, early September, until the election, almost every single time there has been a swing to the Republicans, except for 2 years, which was in 2018 and 2012. And 2018 was a very small swing. So, well, you can't definitely say this. We can almost certainly say there will likely be a late swing to the Republicans. And if there is a swing to the Democrats, that would mean it would be a very small swing. And let me be very clear. You can't take percentage of the vote in the House, like for House seats, and convert it into seats. That's not possible. Because in this last election, in 2022, Democrats got a somewhat low percentage of the vote. They only got 47% of the vote, 47.8% to be exact. And they won a decent amount of seats. They won 212 seats. Maybe it was 213. It was close. But in 2012, Democrats won 48%, 48.8%, and they won even less seats. So you can't convert it. It's not, and also the maps were different back then. You can't convert it. That's not possible. But I think the percentage of the vote is important because if it's a large lead, like it was in 2018, at this time in 2018, Democrats had a lead of 7.8%, and then in the final election, it turned out to be 8.6%, which gave them that massive majority that they got. So, in 2022, in 2020, in 2016, 2014, and in 2014, there was a swing to the Republicans in the last 2 months. So that you can't, of course, every year could be different, but that would make me think, at best, Democrats are going to gain a couple of seats, which might be just enough to take the majority, because they're only a few seats behind. But that would make me think there will be a narrow Republican majority just like there is right now. And I've already talked about the Senate. So that could mean Republicans will be in complete control of Congress going into what would either be Kamala Harris's presidency, and that would make her a very ineffective president, or going into Donald Trump's presidency, which would mean that we would have a Republican trifecta just like we did 8 years ago. And that should be what scares Democrats the most. The fact that Republicans could be in complete control of the government once again. Now, let me just say, they won't be in complete control because there will still be a filibuster in the Senate. But there will be a lot. But Republicans could always nuke that filibuster. That could happen at any time. Anyway, that's all I have to say about that. I do want to mention, unfortunately, let's turn back to the presidential election a little bit. There was a school shooting in Georgia. There was also a school shooting in Baltimore, Maryland, near Baltimore, which is not that far from my house. And unfortunately, school shootings, well, the one in Maryland was a little bit different. I can explain that later. The school shootings have been basically my entire life. That has been a trend. Columbine was about 4 years before I was born, and that was really the first major one. Sandy Hook, which was in 2012, that was while I was in elementary school. 2018 was Parkland. That was probably the next big one. I was in middle school. Uvalde, I was in high school when that happened, and now I'm in college, and this mass shooting has happened again. Of course, this wasn't as big of a one in terms of like death count. And I saw somewhere, so don't quote me on this, but we've had 600 mass shootings since 2007. We've had over 600, like in school shootings. I'm sorry, which is incredibly sad. It really is. I remember in 2018 when I heard about the Parkland shooting, it was that was something that really resonated with me, and I'm sure many people remember that. It's been almost 7 years since it happened. We had at my school, in my middle school, we had like an event about gun safety, and I not many people know this, but I actually walked out of that assembly with a handful of other people during what was supposed to be the nationwide, like I think 18 minutes of silence. I actually just got up and left the school. Of course, the teachers were like, "No, you can't go out there. What if somebody's going to shoot at you?" It was very pathetic. But when I came back, people were very, they really liked what I had. They were very proud of me, and I was very proud to do that. I was a lot more on the left back then. I'm much more centrist now. But I would like to say that even after all this time, I would like to see something be done. The facts, I'm not going to go over the huge facts of the case, but when I was, the shooter was 14 years old. He used an AR-style rifle. Here's how some of the candidates reacted. Trump, he's kind of going the complete opposite. He wants to rescind gun regulations enacted by Biden. And Trump, although when he was president, this is notable, he banned bump stocks, but that ban was overturned by the Supreme Court. And J.D. Vance, he wants to go even further. He wants to abolish the ATF, the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives, which enforces all of our regulations. And the NRA celebrated him when he was picked as vice president. He has said that school shootings are a fact of life. I have to completely disagree with Senator Vance. School shootings should never be a fact of life. And I think a lot of people who don't think that school shootings need to be solved is because they don't see it as a problem. I'm not putting all the blame on Republicans. I think Democrats have some blame here too. I think one of the smart ways would be to put security guards in schools. Then these have to be good security guards, because I know in Parkland they had a security guard and he ran and hid like everybody else, which is pathetic, and I don't know what ended up happening to him, but that is terrible, terrible, terrible. If you're going to be in that job, then you need to be ready for it. Kamala Harris said that we should have an assault weapons ban of the assault weapons ban of 1994 should be reinstated. It was a ban that President Clinton signed. It was only in effect for 10 years, which expired in 2004. And then, of course, in 2004, that was when the Bush administration was in office, and they were not going to extend the ban, and therefore it expired. If you look at a chart from before the ban to after the ban, during the ban compared to before, the number of mass shootings did not really rise. But as soon as the ban ended, it went up and up and up, and it has never come down. So the act likely did something. Of course, you could say correlation causation, which is true, but in all likelihood, it's likely that the ban did something. And then Tim Walz has very similar views to Kamala Harris. He was once an avid gun rights owner, and he was celebrated by the NRA many, many, many moons ago, but now he has an F rating from the NRA, which I'm sure he is very, very proud of. Anyway, I do hope to see change like that, but it does seem like every time the nation calls out for change after a shooting, especially at a school, it never comes to pass. So what I will say is this shooting in Baltimore or near Baltimore, I just want to throw out there, it was very similar in that it was a school shooting, and it was by a young man. A 15-year-old boy died. He died in a school bathroom in Maryland. He had to be airlifted to Baltimore, and then he died. And the 16-year-old suspect is in custody. So it is very sad, of course. My thoughts and prayers do go out to them. Of course, we should do more than thoughts and prayers, but there's not much I can do other than encourage you all to advocate for change in whatever way you see as fit. I think something should be done. To me, it doesn't really matter what it is. Anyway, that is all I have to mention in this episode. I do want to say I almost forgot. There will be a debate. How could I forget this? There will be a debate tomorrow. It will be in Philadelphia. There will be no live audience. The microphones will be unmuted the whole time, which is unlike the June debate, and which is more similar to the 2020 debates. There will also be no notes. There will be no sitting down. It will be standing up just like it was before. It will begin at 9 p.m. So it will begin at 9 p.m. on the East Coast. We'll have to see. There will also be a vice presidential debate, but that won't happen until October, so we can talk about that later. So next episode, I plan to review the debate. If there was anything important going on, I will not be doing a post-debate like I did the last debate. I only did that because that was wow, okay, I really got to do an episode on this considering what's happened. But I don't think that's going to be necessary this time. So anyway, and then after that, later in the month, I will be bringing on I've referred to him before, I will bring on one of my friends. He is a poll expert. He knows a lot about the polls, and I hope to have him on the show toward the end of the month. So thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something, and I can't wait to hear from you all next week. Bye-bye.